from now. So short graduation. Okay. We're going to touch on this again. We're gonna demo it. We may as well. We've got one more week, hopefully. As I said, we'll find out. But one more week of distance learning. So why not do something a little bit complicated and talk about a haircut that people worry about constantly. And to be honest, you haven't got to worry about the short graduation. It is a very, very simple haircut to complete because all you're doing is working around the head shape. So remembering that the head is round and we're primarily going to work with a round shape. Okay, so you will see, first of all, I have my section off on the top again. As I mentioned before, I work into a slight point into the back just because I find it a little bit easier to get my balance, but also I have my crown area in the top here somewhere. So as we've said before, when you're working on a crown shape or something in the top piece, if your crown is quite jumpy or there's a double crown, triple crown, something like that, and you put it in your bottom section, because we're going to be using a lot of tension under here and running with a lot of tension around the back and around the back of the head, your crown's going to jump. So if you have maximum tension in the base and then you let the hair go when you dry it, that's going to jump up. So I always put it in the top. It's just a little bit easier that I find to control my shape. My section then also comes around on the roundness of the head and runs all the way around onto sort of a mid-recession on both sides. You'll see I'm slightly off balance. Okay, my reason for is I'm going to put a little bit of a part in one side and show you a different way to work the top section down. So I'm imagining in my mind that I want something to be falling this way. So I always run a tiny bit lower on the right-hand side. It's just a personal opinion of mine because it helps me to control my corner that's running somewhere in here on our 3D shape. Okay. On the short graduation that we did before, I'm going to do this one slightly differently because I want to show you that there's two different ways or a few different ways that you can work your short graduation. But I don't think there's any point in me just running through the same haircut again as we've done 2 weeks ago. I'm going to do something slightly different where we start in the front as opposed to starting in the back. Because this is the way that I work hair. I like working from the front. And there's a number of reasons why, because when you start in the back, you're sort of guesswork until you get round to the front of the length that you're looking to see and the length that the guest is actually looking for. So I want to alleviate any guesswork, basically. I don't want to be panicking as I'm coming around the front and thinking, oh, I've gone too short, or is this going to be too short for her? So I basically want to start in the front and control my length in here, first of all. Then when we've done that, we just work our way back. Okay. Secondly, because we're going to be working with something called a round shape. So if you're accustomed to shape work and accustomed to the way we talk about shape and how we control hair and manipulate hair to move around the head, we want to control the way the hair's falling or help us control the way we can style the hair through. So if you're working with a graduated bob, for instance, we call that a triangular shape because we're pushing the hair and pushing the weight forwards. Okay, so we start in the back, diagonal sections facing forwards. If you remember when we're coming through from the back, we're diagonal sections forwards and pulling everything back. So we're flowing the weight forwards because we're using over direction to go shorter into longer and lighter into heavier. Okay, your round shape's going to flip that on its head. So on the graduated bob, you get that hair sitting in and forwards. A round shape, we want it coming back off the face. So my haircut, for instance, is a round graduation because I like it off my face. It's shorter in the front, longer in the back, and it controls the way the hair falls off my face. It's so much easier to control that hair. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So I've sectioned the top off and we're going to work in the sides. Has anyone started in the front before? Quite interesting to find out. Anyone done anything in the front where they've started with their short haircut and started in here? Or have you all started in the back like we do on the LHA videos? I'd imagine all at the back.
No, I done one with you, Rob, and I think we started on the sides.
Oh yeah, we did. Sick.
Yeah.
That's Louisa, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, so your iPhone then, good, nice. Okay.
Is that me?
Yeah. That's lucky because I've got to get you in the register. Yeah, so we did. See, there's no real difference in the way it finishes, but I find it easier starting in the side because it's just showing more control. And obviously, Louisa and I, we worked it, and hopefully you found it easier. If you didn't, you will find it easier, because when we go back, we're going to do it. So
Yeah, no, I definitely did.
good, perfect. So what we want to do is, first of all, work out our balance and work out our control. Okay, so how steep of a line do we go? How steep of a section do we create? So when you're working horizontally, you're going to be building full amounts of weight. So you're going to work horizontally when you're working with your line work. When we layer hair, we're going to be working vertically, okay, when we're working around the shape. So how steep of a line do we create when we're working with our overall section? And there's one thing that people say all the time on videos that is incorrect, okay? And I'm gonna alleviate now. Not with a short haircut, but with shape from, yeah, sick. The shape, we've done a shake together, innit? I think we would have done a shake together. So yeah, a CBA, Shake's a proper good haircut. There's a video of that. I'll send that into you guys to see. It's proper sick. But how much of a diagonal line do we want to be? Okay, so what you'll find is that people say that your diagonal sections, they push hair around the head. Okay, so it means if we're working like this, you're pushing the hair from front to back. That is incorrect. Okay, your sections will not push your hair around the head. They don't do that. So I was taught that when I was working, when I was growing up, when I was 16, 17, 18, I was taught that the directional sections push hair around the head. They don't. Okay, you can work vertically and still style the hair back. Right, that's completely up to you how you do it. Also, you may be told that the higher your diagonal line, or the steeper your diagonal line, means the lighter the hair becomes. It doesn't, okay? That's incorrect, because you can cut layering horizontally, you can cut layering vertically, you can cut layering however you want to cut it, because it's all on your elevation. So how high you lift the hair, it doesn't matter if your section is horizontal, because I can create my very heavy line down here, and that's still heavy, but I'm working horizontally, yeah? But I can also create a very light shape by lifting higher and cutting all my shape off. Make sense? So that's also incorrect. What I utilize my diagonal line for is primarily where I want to find my weight line at the back. So this weight line here, okay? So if I move out the way, you can see that my shape comes up and then it comes down and round, and it sort of hits a point in here, yeah, in where my occipital bone is. So how cool or quirky do I want this haircut to be? How close to a pixie cut do I want it to be? Okay, that's what I use as my overall vision of where I want my steepness to be in my line or in my section, okay? Because we know that our cutting line mirrors our cutting section, okay? So if I were to work something really quite a shallow diagonal line, okay, and I'm going to put a clip in there because it's really very short. By the way, I've got another haircut in here, so when I come back here, there's not much hair, so I'm running low on blocks, so you have to mind that. But if I'm coming in here, my section is still my section's mirroring my cutting line. Okay, so if everything's working like that, I'm leaving more length in the shape. Okay, so that my weight line is going to fall down here somewhere. So if somebody's got really fine hair and we want to still create that little short round graduation, we can stack the hair up and create more of a shape because my cutting line is increasing the length. Okay, but say for instance she's quite young and quite cool and quite quirky, or you've got stage work to do and you want something more pixie cut-ish with a really long fringe in the front, for example, we could come with something a lot higher, a lot steeper with our shape, which primarily then is still diagonal backwards. Yeah, it's still got that slight diagonal feel to it, but primarily in here, if I move out the way, and my cutting line is still mirroring my cutting shape, if I stand out the way, we can automatically see that we come a little bit higher with our shape. So then as we work round to the back, it's going to be choppier, it's going to be softer, and it's going to be a little bit more of a higher weight line running through here. Okay, so however you want to control your shape through your consultation, if she's quite quirky and quite sick and quite cool, you can work something with a higher section and you know full well that when you come through to your shape, it's going to sit a little bit quirkier. But if you come a little bit flatter, it's just going to be a little bit more of a classic look. Okay, does that make sense? I know I'm talking a lot, but does it make sense? Is there any questions on that, first of all? Good. Perfect. The chat bar is open, so if you want to watch the chat bar, if you want to write something in there because you don't want to speak over the microphone, please do. You can also message me in private on there if you are very, very shy, and I will see. Rohan, you have to see it first. Yeah, straight. Let's do it. So first section, I'm going to go slightly in the middle. It's difficult to understand, but hopefully you will when you. It's hard doing it on video as well. When you do it, you'll see. So I'm going slightly diagonal with my first section. Okay, because I want this to be quite quirky. I want it to be a little bit cool. I want it to be quite a bit more choppier than the usual short graduation. Also, because I'm going to take this block down a little bit. We've only got a week left, hopefully. So I'm going to take the block down. Heads up, as usual, so 90 degrees between the chin and the chest. And I'm going to start working myself round the shape. Okay, so we graduate on the inside of our fingers, layer on the outside. It's just more comfortable. And this is going to be my shortest piece in the right-hand side. Okay, so we're going to work our first section, keep my elevation below 90 degrees, and take my shape. Okay, so same as you do with your short graduation, where you're working however steep you want to go or however light or heavy you want to go, is primarily on your elevation. Okay, if we double check where that falls now, quite happy with the way that sits. Also, you've got to be careful of when you're working on a mannequin that you've got this massive great expanse from behind her ear to the hairline. Okay, that's going to throw you off. It's going to look a little bit untidy when you're finished, but on a person, you can style all of this little piece forward here, and that gives you that nice roundness. So don't ever let that throw you too much. So it will look a little bit bitty on the outline when you're finished. Okay, so section 1 is in. Section 2, we're just going to come next door. Okay, so the same parallel sections all the way around into the back. So section 2 comes next to section 1. And we're going to over direct section 2 back into section 1. Then section 3 back into 2, 4 back into 3. Okay, so as we're stepping round the head, we're increasing the length gradually into the back. Okay, so increasing the flow. So section 2, head stays in the same place. Section 2 comes back into section 1 with the same elevation and run down. And then again, make sure we're starting to step around. And then as we double check where that's going, it starts to all connect and control. Okay, so if we start to work this on the head sheet, section 1 in there, section 2, and then section 3 is going to start to come around the back of the person's head. Okay, each section we over direct back to the previous section, or 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3. This just helps us look to control the way the weight is falling. And we know that our expected fall is going to come down into here and then sit quite choppy into the front. Okay, well, that's the idea anyway. So as we start to come around the back, we now have to step round. So similarly, as you're doing your short graduation starting in the back, where you're moving around the head, you do exactly the same when you're starting in the side. So where I started here in the front, I step to the left for section 2, then step to the left again for section 3. Everything is working here, so I don't move my fingers or my hands. I just, on that top section, it's just working the same. Then when I come down section 2 or the underneath pieces, we just start to move in. But all we've got to do is move around the head. Okay, so section 3, I've stepped into the left, and elevation stays the same because I want that to be a nice constant flow. Okay, and take my shape, and then I'm coming down into behind the ears here. So I now want to stay stepped where I stepped and start to follow the shape of the head or the flow of the person's head. Okay, and step again, just as we come in down to the mastoid process bone, and run my line. So now if we see the way this connects, it all comes backwards nicely and starts to lay down flatter into the shape. Okay. Section 4 starts to come around the back, and we just continue the flow of the haircut. So there's section number 4. It's quite difficult to see this mannequin, isn't it, really? Should I put a different colour top? If I stand here, you can't see it. Would it be easier if I put a different colour top on? I suppose I'm not in the way of it at the moment. So section 4, we'll over direct back to section 3. Okay, so elevation stays the same, and we start to control, and then we're stepping round. So I'm going to step into here and work my shape down into the nape of the guest. So step round again. So everything you're doing is pulling towards your body. I think that's one of the most important things of a short graduation that people get a little bit messed up on, is because you're almost reaching for the hair. So you're pulling this section here when really you're stood here. So move yourself around so that you're creating a much, much more easable flow to your haircut. Okay. It's so much easier to control it when you can actually see what you're doing. Okay. So as we're starting to come in, we've gone in 2 sections, and it starts to connect quite nicely into the base. Okay. And then again, if we run through, we can start connecting the way we're going. So if I stand out the way here, you'll see what I mean. So we're starting to pop ourselves back around here and run through, and then step round as I go and just follow the shape of the head. So all a short graduation is just something to hug the head and hug the flow of the person's scalp. Okay. And then again, double check where we're going. Hair likes to sit back because it's getting longer as we come through, but then we can just control the tuck and control the way that sits in the base. All right. And then I'm going to start to run out of hair back here because I've done a really short graduated bob, but you get the idea. So again, section 5 back into section 4. Keep my elevation high at the top. So every time at the top, my elevation's round here. If we start to pull down, we know we're too weighty. So keep your elevation high. And then as we start to come round, we start tucking ourselves in. So we're almost coming into here and then flow that down and kink it into the base. Okay, so you want that sort of 3D shape still to be sat quite high and nice the whole way around the hair. Okay, hopefully this is making sense. If it's not, please do let me know. If you've got any questions, please do ask me about those as well. I get for some of you this is going brand new stuff here, or into completely new territory because you've always started in the back. It's very, very similar, I promise you. The technique's the same as the short grad starting in the base, but you're just working with a diagonal section and pushing that back. Okay, so it's exactly the same technique as we did 2 weeks ago. I will resend the video to you guys as well from last week. It is on my YouTube page, so I've just made everything that I've done cutting wise public, so access it on there as well. So now I'm only going to go to the very back. So I'm only going to go to my point. Okay. Why? Can anyone tell me why I'm only going to go to the point of my work and then stop and start in the front? Why would I not just continue this all the way around into the left-hand side? What do you do around the ears? I'll come on to that in a minute. Good question. So I've hit the back section now. I've hit the very center back of the person's head. Unbalanced? Yes, it will be unbalanced. But why do we think it would be unbalanced? You're right, Rohan. It will be unbalanced. But any ideas as to why? I've done this myself. So we're working something round. You need the back section to tuck in. Yes, you do. Yeah, absolutely. So we're working round. Okay, so everything is over directing forwards. So each time we're working, we're over directing each section back into the section beforehand. I don't know if I've got a different color top in here. Just stand out the way. So section 2 was 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3, 5 to 4, 6 to 5. I can't even count. Okay, so by the time we get round to here, we've got the shortest piece in the back. Yeah, like a duck's ass, it's called. Duck's bottom. Very PC of you. So a DA is basically where everything comes in and tucks in the back, but it's quite a severe look. As Ryan says, it is quite an old-fashioned look. This is a lot more softer, so it's a similar sort of technique. But because we've over-directed to the previous, we've got shorter in the front and longer into the back, okay? We then want to do exactly the same back here. So we want to go shorter here and longer back here, okay? If I were just to carry on from the back to the front, it turns into a triangular shape. So round shapes get shorter in the front, longer in the back, and they push weight back. Triangular shapes get shorter in the back, longer in the front, and they push weight forwards. Yeah, makes sense? Hopefully. If it's the first time you're hearing about shape, then don't worry about that. But we basically want to come back to the front and run that same shape back into here, okay? Bit confusing, isn't it? But if we work our head sheet round, you may see it a little bit easier. So we're working into the base, okay? Let's rub that off. And if we come through with our over direction line, everything's coming back, okay? So we know, if we really do think about it, we know that if everything's coming back to the previous on the front side, on the first side, if we carry on going, we're going to be increasing our length. Because we're pushing length from the very front to the back, then we're also going to be pushing length from the back to the front. And we don't want that, because like Rohan says in the group, it's going to be unbalanced, okay? So as we start to come around here in the base, we're working with our curved sections round, okay? And it's like your gentleman's cutting cross graduation. We're over directing our sections over to the previous, so we need to control our shape, okay? So now we're going to come back into the front, and we're going to look to control the way the hair falls in there, because we've created our really nice little graduation in the back here with our elevation, okay? Still getting shorter in the base and longer into the top, so we're building weight on top. Hopefully this is making sense. If it's not, then please do ask me anything. In relation to coming around the ears, they're all your outline work. So you'll see here, I've left a load of softness around my ears because I'm going to come through and have a look at my outlines later. On an actual person, the hair's not so rigid around the hairline. There's about 4 or 5 different rows of hair in here. So you will find that it looks very, very rigid and very strong, which I personally quite like. But there's the bit where I'm talking about where it just goes bing and then bing down into your shape. So on a person, it's a lot softer. So that sort of comes in here and you get that nice control of the overall look. But when you're working around the ears, if you've gone really tight, take it around the ears. It looks great. Or just leave some softness over the top of them, okay? Because you've taken the weight out of the shape, it will work perfectly, okay? So now as we're coming into the left-hand side, we're going to start again. So this time come back into the front, and it's really important to get your balance. So a nice easy way to do so, if you use combs like mine, my YS Parks, they've got little dots on here, and these I always have a hole around the ears. How do I stop that? Are you talking when you're coming shorter? When you're doing short haircuts, you always have a hole around the ears, or when you do any form of haircut, like a bob. The graduated bob. Yeah, the graduated bob. We'll talk, I'll send you a video. The graduated bob, you've got to use less tension or pull the hair away from the ear too well. I always tried once. Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll go through that when we go back. I've got videos on it. I'll send you a video, but you've got to use a little bit less tension. If you're pulling your hair down here, if you're just doing a bob and you're pulling it really tight, you're going to get a hole because it's going to spring up because the ear sticks out of the head. Okay. I personally, section away from the front, pull it back, cut it in there, and when you dress it across, it's perfect every time. But I'll send you some stuff, okay? As I said, these basically give you a bit of a ruler if you use one of these. I don't use the ruler, I just work on visually. If you remember where your section was and where your elevation was, you can just work your shape down. So we're going to take section number 1 into here, and it's the same as when we were coming around the front bit from the other side. So the same diagonal section. And we're going to start working in between our fingers again. So I now want my shape to be high. Okay. So here we want to scoop the hair out. I always see people coming underneath and combing the hair underneath. Okay, the problem with that is I always say if you comb under, a lazy hairdresser combs underneath, because that's just let's get it in the hair. But as you're pulling the hair up like this, you're creating that little bit more of a stacked feel. So you're pulling hair away from it naturally wants to be. Comb over the top, okay, not there because I'm tucking. Comb over the top and scoop, okay? So much cleaner with your work. Her head's a bit too far over. So we'll scoop up and scoop away. And then I'm going to work this down gradually, okay? I don't know how far in I've gone or how short I've gone, so I work the first piece down, find that I'm too long, and then come back in. And you can always take more hair off. You can never go short. You can never put hair back on, obviously. So just be careful with your shape, gentle with your shape. If you go too short here, you've had it. You've got to go back round to the other side and start again. Okay, so check your balance once again. I'm still a tad longer on the right. So again, come in and just take off those little ends, and then we should be fine. Good, okay. So then we know we're balanced, and we will be balanced for the rest of the haircut because we're just doing the same technique. So section 2, we're now going to over direct that back into section number 1. So I start to step round, okay. Elevation is going to stay the same. Combing over the top to just scoop the hair away and run the shape. So again, combing in, and elevation stays the same, and we run the line. So then we're going to start to run our shape back round to the base, and we're going to see that we start to connect in with this side here. Okay, so you've got 2 forms of guideline that are going to start to appear, one from the front and one in from the base. Okay, so as we start to work round, I'm going to move her instead of stepping, and elevation stays the same on the underneath, on the top section, and then we start to run that line in and start to tuck. So fingertips facing the floor, and then you'll see here as we come in, we start to connect with the opposite side. Yeah, so we've got a short piece and a short piece, and then we know that we're now running that line back in and pushing the weight right into the center. So next section round. Very, very simple haircut once you really do get the hang of it. And to be honest, you've just got to have a go at doing it, because like anything, watching it on a video, it's confusing. I get it. I know that's why we all want to come back so soon, because being in salon is so much easier. But when you're when you think about the short graduation that you do, or the short graduation that we teach in the LHEA, it's very simple, isn't it? All you're doing is just vertical, but you're just stepping around the head as you're going. So your fingers are staying in the same place anyway. All we're doing here is just moving that vertical section slightly diagonal and moving the section into the section before, starting in a different place. With relation to hair, you'll be told time and time again that you've got to know the rules before you can break the rules. I disagree with that, because it doesn't matter if you find a way that works well for you, then do it. If it still looks perfect, no one's going to mind. Your client's not going to say, well, it's a perfect haircut, but you started in the back, then started in the sides, or you started in the sides rather than the back. They're not going to know, are they? Your examiner or an EPA, she's not going to know either. We went through, at the very start of this whole lockdown thing, we went through a EPA preparation session and talking about just how to get through your EPA perfectly and pass your EPA with distinction and things like that. And it's all done in how you start and how you tell her what you're doing. For me, it is, because your practical experience is there, your knowledge of hair is there to get through the exam, and you're gonna be able to tell her you're gonna be able to execute your plan. But if you tell her your plan in a way that she doesn't know, so that you're basically teaching her, you're going to be perfect. So if I were doing a little short graduation as my restyle, I'd start in the front and I'd tell her why I'm starting in the front. I'd start talking about shape. I'd start talking about the way I want the hair to dress back off the face softly, just so I'm using my diagonal section to help me do so. She's going to think, oh my God, you know more than me. So that's really what you're after. Okay. And as we come around to the final section, we can find that we've got that little point. So we want to take that off. So as Rohan said in the base, it comes around and looks a little bit like a DA. So if you don't know what a DA looks like, do Google it. It's an old-fashioned hairstyle that has quite a ridge in it. It was quite a popular little look, really. So that's the underneath, okay? So you can see, if I stand here, well, how can we get the light to change? Because you can sort of see it easier. But you can see the way the hair comes back into the shape and all has that really nice solid line and stability. So the flow just works so well with the internals of the look, okay? Obviously on a mannequin, it's quite solid, so ignore those bits in here. I think they're quite cool. You can get that really nice outline. But you can also see the 3D shape has that little bit more of a stability. So the way we work around the look sits quite nicely, okay? To cross-check it, we just go against our shape, okay? So where we were working around here, we're gonna work around there, okay? So work this in your graduated bob sections. So push down, come across either side, and we just want to work this internally, diagonally facing forwards. So next piece in, find your gap, find that we're balanced, and start to work your way up. You can only, if you go 3 or 4 sections in and it's good, you know you're going to be fine. Any little pieces, just take them away. But you pretty much know that you're going to be okay. If your first one's in, generally, if you feel confident with it, don't bother going any further because you know you're going to be fine. But only until you get really confident, do not want to cross-check. You can also see it quite visually. So if I pull her in quite close, you could see quite easily visually if there was anything in there that wasn't really working, it wouldn't sit so smooth. It wouldn't sit so clean to the shape. There would be something in there that would sort of jut out and not sit very well. So you can always tell visually as well. You'd always have a little bit of a lump or a bump. So I'm going to blow dry the underneath. Give me about 2 minutes, okay? And then we shall be back. If there are any questions, think of them over this little period where I'm blow drying, and then we'll answer them in a second when we're doing our outlines and when we're doing the top, okay? For the blow dry, I'm literally going to do a little wrap drying technique, okay? So with my 9-row vest brush or a Denman you can use, you don't want to come in with a round brush because you're going to get too much volume in the shape. So I'm just going to wrap dry the hair through, get it nice and smooth, and then have a look at outlines, okay? If you've got any questions, put them in the chat bar as well if you don't want to speak over the mic. Wonderful. So are there any questions before we continue? Anyone got anything they want to know? Anything I want to go through? I'm going to change the colour of it up a little bit. Wee. So any questions at all, please do let me know. Wee. Right, this should be better. So I haven't got anything white in the room, but blue will do. So we can see now that we've got our shape sitting quite nicely. Okay, so we can see the technique is in, and we can see that the shape of the hair sits quite nicely. Everything works quite well. Okay, so the short graduation is primarily your absolute key to control. We want to have a look at our outlines first of all, though. So when we start to come in outlines, well, we can see the flow in the haircut in the middle, so it's quite good. Then the length of the hair comes back, sits a little bit closer into the base, which is nice, but everything has that nice little bit of flow to it and a little bit of technique. And then we run into the front again. Okay, so if I hadn't had a graduated bob in here, I would do something quite jazzy with my outline down the back. Because that's so short in here, I can't change the way that looks. But I'm going to just dust a little few bits here and show you a few techniques that I personally like to use when I'm working on hair. So just pulled that out, put that back. So firstly, we want to look at areas around the front. So this whole area in here is a very nice area to be able to create some shape. Okay, so you'll always have this little bit here that juts. I take that off personally. I like to open up the eye socket area. So I talk a lot about bone structures and stuff, but I like to open up this whole area of somebody's face and just create that little bit more of a circular motion so that you get that point. As I say, the hair on a block is so rigid. On a person, you'll get this really nice piece sitting forwards here. You can get that softness, and then that sort of comes in the back so you can control your outlines. So for me, I always start in the face framing area. So I just pull the hair down and just run myself a piece of softness in here just to open up a bone structure. Okay, it's really important that you do this because you won't see it too much in the haircut, but you just stop you having these little bits that fall forwards and just look a little bit untidy and messy. Then that normally comes in and sits into the front, so you get a really cool little point, but mannequins are useless for that. And then just come and clean off any area in here that you want to clean off. On a person, again, you can keep it quite soft if you want to, but ignore that on a mannequin. Okay, and then the same around here. So you can see the internal shape and the flow that works so nicely internally. It's got a really good flow to it. But all your outlines are doing is just controlling and cleaning up any area. So again, just come in and remove that little front bit. And then just soften any area here. Okay, so you've got to be a bit sort of imaginative with it, but that would come down. Be nice and cool. Something on the cheekbone area works really well. But because I got it quite choppy, I wanted it quite choppy. You can sort of mess it up a little bit and just give it that zhuzh and have a little bit more of a sort of playfulness to it if you want to. Still works quite nicely when you have a little bit of softness in there, as opposed to it just being completely smooth. I think the good sign of a really good haircut is that something can be blown about all over the place in the wind and still sit down perfectly. And if it doesn't sit down perfectly, it still works really nicely. So it still looks quite cool when you have got all of that untidiness and all of that messiness. Okay, so onto the top. There's many ways to do the top. Okay, who knows of a way to do the top? Anyone know? We've worked these a lot in Loughton. I know we haven't. And over the lockdown period, we've also touched on the top sections quite considerably as well. So anybody got any ideas of how we could do it? No? We're a bit shy today. Okay, let's do it. So top section, I'm going to just basically work it how I usually do. I want to be a slight side parting and I want the top to just basically flow from the underneath. So one way you can work it is just working like a uniform layer. So work your sections horizontally, moving from back to front, and then you get that uniform shape. We want to connect it into these baseline here. So this piece here, we want to basically just, this one, we want to run that up all the way around here, back to front. So we want to just connect it into the underneath. So whether you work from the front all the way back and then work your corners out, you can do that, or work from back to front and you can do the same. So just working horizontally and then work off your corners, okay? Personally, I think that's a little bit of a basic way to do it. I don't normally do that because you've got all this flow underneath, all the connectivity, all of the really nice shape, and then you're just going to ruin it with the top. The top's not going to work as well as the underneath. So you may as well have just done a vertical section haircut the whole way around, okay? The way I like to work it is just increasing my line from the bottom into the top. So if I've worked my diagonal line in the base, I'm going to do the same around the top and just do exactly the same technique, but just work it from front to back, okay? So very, very simply, if we start, she's too low. If we start in here, make sure the head is nice and straight. Okay, and we're now going to go on the outside of our fingers because we're layering hair and we're lifting, so it's a lot easier to lift and layer on the outside of your fingers. So when we come in and down, start pushing the hair back again because that's where we're going, okay? And then section 1, diagonal away. I'll keep a clip in there just so you guys can see the section. And it's exactly the same section, isn't it, to the underneath? And now we're just going to elevate high, find our guide, which is, find the guide which is in there, okay, and cut it. And if you want to point cut, you can point cut, completely up to you. So we can just lift off and point off any area just to texturize down. But instantly we can see that the hair wants to flow back and just connect. So again, section 2, we're going to pull section 2 back into section 1 because we want to gradually increase the length towards the back of the head and run around again. And then section 3, we can pull that back into section 2. Again, I'd be moving around, but I'm just twisting her head so I'm not in front of the camera. So section 3, back into section 2, and then we're going to work all the way around into our final point. Now I took a big section, but I've not got much hair to cut, so that's quite easy. Do slim your section down if you've got more hair. And then when we dress that, we can see it all connects and wants to sit on top of the underneath shape, okay? So then we're going to come back into the front piece here and do the same. So this side's a little bit more difficult because we've got to make sure we flow with the shape of the head, but we've also got to allow for the length of the hair. So because this has got further to travel, or this piece of hair has got further to travel to sit balanced with this side. So this side, we can see we sit here. We don't want this side. If I come round all the way, this is going to be really short on top, okay? So I want to almost bring this section up here and then this piece almost out here somewhere so that we keep enough length for this piece of hair from the parting to sit down and be balanced. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I do it from the back, we can control our line here. So we control with our guideline and connect with the bottom. And then as we start to run around the top of the head, I just want to pull this out here somewhere, okay? And there's no real way of knowing where to pull the hair until you've done it, but just do it as a trial and error sort of thing. So then as we drop it, we can see that our balance will always sit quite nicely. Okay, because otherwise if I come round too round into the top of the head, it's going to go too short. Okay, so then section 2, keep that nice and round. So where's the thing? Section 2 is coming in nicely round. Okay, and we're just going to start to move around the shape. So again, coming up, if you want to point cut this, you can point cut it, completely up to you. Just make sure you don't cut yourself. And then start to work our shape and connect to the bottom. Okay. Are there any questions? Anything that anyone wants to ask? Or has it sort of covered it really? Hopefully it sort of covered it. If there are questions, do ask them. There isn't a silly question. No thing is a bad question. I've asked them all in my time, so don't worry too much. So again, round the shape. And then my last little piece. Is it a boyish style for a lady? I'm reading that right. That's tough. Not really. I mean, you can make it like a boyish style if you want it to for a lady. Something quite androgynous if she's going for that sort of look. But depending on the softness, it's a very soft haircut. It's a very feminine haircut. It's a very soft way of creating a shorter lady's look. And it works perfectly when you do keep your softness in there, because she's still going to have a long fringe area. So we've still got this long area in the front where we can get that texture to it or get something in there. When it blow dries out, it looks really cool with that little bit of length in the front. So I wouldn't say it's a boyish look for a lady, because it's fundamentally, you can go so many different ways with it. So it's not just one haircut, depending on the diagonalness of your section and the way you're elevating and the way you connect the top, you can basically do 7 or 8 different haircuts with the same technique, because you're just using different variations. So I think with the way you work with LHAA working vertically, it's just a very one-dimensional haircut. This can create something different. Okay. Thinking. What about if you had a centre parting? Do the same sort of thing. So just work exactly the same, but from the centre. So your elevation is going to come round and round the same point. Okay. So if we've got our, what's happening here? So if we've got our parting on here, obviously our sections are coming round. But if you've got it in the center, you're just going to do the same as this, but from the middle. Okay. And then obviously everything was over directed into the previous to build our length on both sides. Okay. So I'm going to blow dry again. Give me 2 minutes and then we'll go. curtains from wood fine. Yeah, it could look a bit curtainy. That's when you have to advise to come away from the centre parting. Others are going to have curtains. Did anyone have curtains as a kid? I had curtains as a kid. I had a bowl cut and curtains. After the bowl cut was curtains. It's terrible. But yeah, you're right, Ryan. If you were in the centre, you could get a curtainy look, but you've got to then style it off the curtains or put a fringe in or something like that. Unless curtains are like the mullet and make a comeback, which, to be fair, around my area, I've seen a load of little kids or young kids who have got curtains. So it's a bit weird. But they are quite cool, really. So now I'm just going to style through. So get a little bit of spray or serum or whatever you want. And just work your finger marks in and fingers through the hair. So it's all about play, all about finding where you want the hair to actually fall. And then you can drop a little fringy bit down and control that.
Rob, quick question.
Yeah.
What's the shape you're going to find at the top if you was to cross-check it on the heavier side?
Oh, good question. So if I were to cross-check, I'm looking for, I'm not going to do it now because I styled it, but I'm looking just pretty much for something like that. Okay, so because we're over directing to the front, we're creating that little bit more of a longer fill, but we're still, because it's round, we're still coming round the shape. Okay.
And you were over directing the heavier side like over by one each time, or would you literally just bring in most of it to the front to make that slightly heavier?
Only by one, absolutely. So similarly to the other side, if we see on there, we don't, if you're pulling everything to the very front, it's going to be too severe. Okay, so it's way too steep coming back, so you're going to get a real massive heaviness back here, but because we're only going to one section, it's just gradually getting longer towards the back, so the same as the underneath. So everything's exactly the same, we're just pulling everything to the previous section, but it's just gradually pushing back. Okay,
very cool. Thanks.
so we can see that we've got that nice shape to it, the nice control. If I move her in closer, I could do a little sidey fringe in there, couldn't I? But oh, cool, what's happened? Let's just tighten this. So we've got that nice little bit of flow to it. The hair wants to come away just off the face, and it all just comes and connects. Everything runs around and connects in. So yes, it's got quite a lot of texture to it and a lot of softness because that's what we've gone for. If you want to go shorter, you can get that little bit more of a pixie-ish look, but it just has that little bit more flow, doesn't it? And a little bit more effect to it, having started in the front and worked my shape back. The fringe is dreadful. Let's do something about this. So fringe-wise, if we want to do a little sidey fringe, we could just pull everything away to the opposite side and very gently just point off that side corner. On a mannequin, when you're doing a side fringe, it's a nightmare. So don't worry too much if you can't get your side fringe sitting nicely, but something like just sitting, peep in the eye to give her a little bit more softness. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, has anyone got any questions? Looks way more feminine with the blow dry. It does, yeah, absolutely. The blow dry makes a huge, huge difference. When you blow dry and style off, your styling is so, so important because you can make a haircut look dreadful, or you can make a haircut look absolutely brilliant just on your styling. So really important that you guys actually do really focus on the last 5 minutes of your haircut and of your actual shape. Any other questions? Anyone got anything they want to go for? I'm going to stop the recording now.